continuing on, discussing the three principal paths, we go now to Bodhicitta, or compassion, ultimate compassion. And homework question says, what does bodhicitta mean? And it asks, does it mean Buddha's mind? It does not mean the mind of a Buddha, but the wish to act like one. The wish to awaken to your true Buddha self, so you can help other beings. And Geshe Michael talked about how true bodhicitta, this aspiration to do everything you can to see yourself basically as a Buddha, is a very rare spiritual breakthrough. To actually, to be imbued with, I think the word imbued is the right word, with this aspiration. And he said it's really a mystical experience that comes from meditation. Again, meditation is really the key in all the Buddhist traditions to achieving some of these aspirations.
Mary Kay?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but we missed one question last.
Oh, thank you. Which one is it?
What is the point at which you know you have developed renunciation?
Oh, thank you so much. That's question 14. And that's because it says homework 14 on the bottom of one page, and then the answer is on the next page. You will know that you have developed true renunciation when you think day and night of achieving freedom from your suffering, and you're no longer distracted by worldly things. As an example, you would rather spend your time meditating or studying spiritual traditions than watching TV. That would be your choice, that would be your pleasure. If you're getting to that point, you're moving much closer to this idea of bodhicitta, because you recognize that to get to this point of really believing you have the power to become a Buddha, it's going to take a lot of study and meditation, and you're not going to get there from anything you hear on TV, probably, although there have been a couple of interesting PBS shows, I have to say, that help, like about the mind, like about the multiverses, especially the things about neurology and physics, I find are very insightful, because it feels like our scientists are moving in this direction. It's like Buddhism and science are coming together these days. Now, whether the Dalai Lama has some influence over science, but it seems in some ways maybe he does. He's sort of very open to it, as Lou was saying. And science was not part of the traditional education system in Tibet. But he has always been intrigued by scientific ideas, and perhaps because he sees this happening, that science is really validating all of that he's learned in his life.
And when it doesn't, he says he's willing to change what he thinks or believes. He says it's science, not that he worships it as an entity in itself, but science says that this is not the way it is, this is not how the world is, then we say, oh, we modify our beliefs instead of finding a way to ignore it.
Right. Or change it. Create a whole new theory.
Yeah, like creationism.
Sorry, that's where my mind was going. But anyway, but there are some points to that. There are some good points to it that you could look at from a Buddhist perspective, but not now because we have very little time to finish the second class. All right, now I'm moving on to the second class, and we went over the first question, which was, thank you for reminding me, Craig, that I missed that one, but they're both related, so that's kind of nice. Number 2, it's just a very interesting idea. So, I said in order to acquire this bodhicitta, first of all, you have to recognize that there's an import to it and want it, to have the wish to try to see your own potential. And then you need to take some action. So one of the ways that the Tibetan Buddhists decided, and this may have originated in India, I'm not sure, to help imbue yourself with bodhicitta, that is the feeling of responsibility for all beings, for helping them, is through something called the cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta. And I'm going to invite you then to do this as a meditation. So if you want to put your pens down, get into a meditation position, which requires you to have your feet firmly planted on the ground, and maybe even off a pillow, because it might make you feel a little imbalanced. Put your hands on your legs. Have your spine very erect, because if we have an energy body, the area for our greatest opportunity is our core, and we want to keep our spine erect, which will allow the core to be open to the energy flow. So this is a meditation to help you begin to develop the wish to help all beings. And to start with, think for a moment about how we and every other living being are the same. The Buddhists say that we are the same in wanting happiness and avoiding pain. That even an ant, when facing fire or something else, will turn around and run away, so that they have that same desire to avoid pain and to survive and be happy. So we start the meditation with a sense of equanimity, that all beings are like us. And we deepen this by thinking about the fact that if we have lived many lives, maybe even countless lives, then we have probably had a relationship with every type of being at some time in one of those lives, or maybe multiple times. And if that's the case, it's possible that any of the beings in our life now, once upon a time, were our mothers. And think about what that means, what a mother is, what a mother does for you. They carry you in their body for 9 months. They equip you with all your basic functions, teaching you everything they can to help you. They devote almost every minute of their lives to you when you're young. And so if everyone has done that for you, have that kindness towards you, then think about how you really should pay them back. Gratitude is a great merit producer of good karma. You know in your heart that you want to pay people back who help you. And besides the payback, you want to offer love to someone who has done for you what a mother has done. Maybe the love with the intensity that a mother has for their only child. You want to give them what's best, highest, everything you can. And certainly you also want to have compassion and remove any suffering that they have. To help them identify and rid themselves of problems. To help them understand that this misery is caused by their own minds. Learn to teach them how to stop the impure parts of their mind. And you recognize that if it's your mother, and it could be all beings were your mother, which still makes them your mother, that it's your personal responsibility to help them. Not the president's, not the people down the street. Your responsibility. Even if no one else helps you, even if you feel like you're doing it all by yourself, you will take on that responsibility for your mothers. And perhaps that thought overwhelms you, because as you are now, it's not possible. But if you could become enlightened, if you could get the body and mind of a Buddha, or awaken to the fact that it's actually in you, then you could do it. Then you'd be able to help all beings. And partly because you would have that emanation ability that would allow you to be many beings helping many beings. And so, with that motivation, that responsibility, you take up the mantle of a bodhisattva, trying to find the way to your own awakening, your own enlightenment, so then you can teach all these other mother beings. And take a deep breath, relax. Come out of the meditation when you're ready. You'll find that in your reading on pages 70 through 80, so you can put it in your homework. The 7-step cause and effect method for achieving Bodhicitta. If you can't remember all that, you can just call it the mother meditation, which is what we affectionately call it. It seems fantastical, unless you believe that you have multiple lives. So maybe you need to start there, exploring that. So be sure to come to the 4th session when we explore future lives, the something of future lives. Forget what that first word is on the chart. The proof of future lives. That's exactly what we want, to help us to use this meditation. Because if we have had multiple, infinite lives, it's probably true that all these other beings of energy have had other relationships with us in the past, maybe even given birth to us. And then I'm going to do question 4 before I do question 3, because I think it's better in that order. And it's in the reading on page 88 and following. So we just talked some about the second path, the path of compassion, or in the Tibetan language, Bodhicitta. Now we're going to talk about wisdom. And in this reading, they choose to talk about wisdom as the understanding of dependent origination. Where do things come from? They are dependent on causes, dependent origination. Some people like to just call it interdependence. Some people, including me. Because I like the idea that it doesn't just go one way, it goes back and forth. I try to remember that. And the fact is that this can happen, this dependent origination, things can arise because nothing is inherently fixed. Remember? Things are empty of having a self-nature. That's the wisdom that we're trying to get to. And now we're going to look at how this has been explored through different schools, Indian schools of thought, of philosophy. What does the question ask, Craig? Question 4.
Explain what Explain what interdependence means in each of the 3 Buddhist schools below, starting with the functionalists.
Okay, the functionalist school. Under the functionalist school, there were many different schools. At one time, there were like at least 18 different schools of thought, meaning schools of thought, not buildings or things like that. The Abhidharma school and the Sutra school and the mind-only school are 3 of them. The only one that really is somewhat functioning today is the mind-only school of thought. There are people who practice and think this way, mind-only. And this group believes that things are dependent on causes and conditions. Kind of what we've been talking about a bit. So that everything depends on the cause. Later schools said, well, that's true, but that's not enough. There's a little bit more to it than that. And one of the reasons we know this is because there's something called empty space. What caused empty space? It seems like empty space has always existed. So, an emptiness itself, sometimes I like to think about empty space is the place where physical matter can arise, and emptiness is the space where mental matter or thoughts can arise. So they talk about both empty space and emptiness as not arising dependently. So the independent school and by the way, there's an error in the notes that you're looking at here. It says the independence group, and what's the Sanskrit next to it?
In the notes, there is no Sanskrit next to it. It just says independent group is
All right, then,
Surprise joke.
okay, then it's in the answer key. It should say Sva Tantrika. And I think it says Swa, it says something different. I could be wrong, though. Maybe it's just that they use a W instead of a V. That's the Sanskrit for the independent school. Sva Tantrika Madhyamika, that's the other Sanskrit. And I just mention this because here we talk often about Madhyamika, the middle, means middle way. And this is called Wisdom's Heart Middle Way Center. So that's why I wanted to mention that to you. Madhyamika is the Sanskrit for middle way. And so this is the theory of middle way, the independence group. And they say that they believe that everything is dependent on its parts. That we give names to collections of things, like the body. The body isn't really a singularity, it's a label that we put on a multitude of parts. And that's the way we see everything. The table isn't an entity but a collection of parts. Love isn't a single thing, it's a whole bunch of different feelings. And there is yet another group that's going to say that this group has not gone far enough yet. Because it doesn't explain the origin of the parts. Where did the parts come from upon which we label these other things? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, what is the smallest part then that we label bigger parts from and bigger parts from and bigger parts from? We've already said that science has tried to find the smallest part, now calling it the God particle, and what next, one wonders. Buddhism would say there is no real smallest part, because in this third school, the consequence group, Prasangika Madhyamika, that's the Sanskrit for it, everything is coming from the mind. The parts upon which we label other names and other parts. This school, the school that these materials come from, Prasangika Madhyamika, the consequent school, says everything is dependent on the mind projecting parts and labeling the parts. And where do those projections come from? See, Buddhism is about asking where, why, always, until you get to the bottom of things, not just stopping at things are based on parts. You got to ask, okay, where do the parts come from? Why do we have these parts? So they say, this Madhyamika Prasangika school, that these materials come from, say that even those smallest parts are things that we see because of our past experiences. We have created our identity, we have created our world. And not so hard to believe when you think about how you come into this world, right? What do you know? What do you think of as you when you're a baby? When you're right out of the womb? Isn't your whole life about creating an identity, creating and naming all the things around you? Isn't that what you do? As a child, you learn to name. This is coming from me now. This wasn't in the notes. But in reflecting on this, it kind of makes some sense to me logically that I have done that. And sometimes I call something differently than other people call it because of my past experience. Because I grew up in Syracuse, New York, where we called things soda, and other people call things pop. And, you know, We have different labels for different things. And for example, what do you call it? An arm. But that's a name you've chosen to give to a cylinder that's extending from this part, which we choose to call a shoulder. But a shark wouldn't call this an arm. Wouldn't think of it as having the same qualities that we do as an important part of our anatomy. They would just think of it as food, perhaps. So the shark has a different projection or identity that it gives to something it sees because of its past experiences. They say there's nothing in the arm itself that gives it armness. That armness comes from how we think about it. And we don't necessarily have a lot of choice in how we think about things. They say that how we do think about things, say things, and act is kind of forced on us by our past. You know? We learn to call something an arm when we were very young, and it's going to take a lot to change our mind that it's not an arm, but it's food. Hopefully. Right? So it's almost like we don't have a choice. We have to call this an arm. If we called this a foreleg, or we didn't call it that, but saw it like that, or this a paw, then we would be perhaps a dog. Our karma would force us to see these things as paws and not as hands. We would have come into this world learning to think of the things, parts of our body as dog parts. Just a little aside, in the Abhidharma, which is the earliest school here, they say you take a birth as a dog or an animal when you've been too proud in your past life. So now, instead of standing erect, you have to go around on all fours. I just think that's an interesting idea, that to learn to be more humble, you come back, you learn that lesson by being an animal who serves. Just interesting. So all these other beings are who they are supposedly because of their karma, and we have the karma to see them as they are. We have the karma to see those four-legged furry creatures who wag their tail whenever we walk in the door as a dog, as giving us love so that we feel also the need to return that love. We have that karma. God knows where the dogs get their loving karma from. I swear they're Buddhas teaching us about how to love. I swear. At least bodhisattvas, right? Trying to teach us to be that receptive to all beings. Not all dogs are like that, however, but many of them are. Some of my greatest teachers have been animals. Two-legged and four-legged. So how does what I'm saying help you stop suffering? How does the idea that what you see in your world is coming mostly from your mind, that has been, the thoughts of which have been formed by your past experience? How does that help?
Realizing you can change it.
Yeah.
You're in control of it.
Yeah, if we get it right, and we see things different, we do the work to see things differently. To see that homeless person as a possible great philosopher the person in the bookstore, or what was it?
The second-hand place.
Second-hand store in Newburyport, to see them as being able to teach us. We might learn something that we had never thought of before, that could change us, could change how we do things, see things, label things. So the idea is, this is all good news, that we are the product of our past experience, which means in the future we'll continue to be the product of our past experience, but our experience for the future is now. So if we get it right now, we have things to look forward to in the future. And according to the three principal paths, the way to do that is use renunciation, use compassion. And then our future has to, because of the laws of karma, has to improve. We'll be forced to have a better life by our karma.
I kind of look at it like you'll be forced to perceive you are having a better life by your karma. You're forced by your karma to perceive that you're having a better life. Not necessarily that it's any different.
You look at a different facet, as I was saying before. Glass half full instead of half empty. That's good. So this is, I'll just bring up one of the classic examples of this. If you have an irritating person in your life, where does the irritation come from? Does it really come from that person? Or are you being irritated? Is your karma forcing you to be irritated? And the Madhyamika Prasangika school would say that if the irritation is not inherent in the person. If it was, that was the cause of that person was the cause of your irritation, then every other being would find that person irritating. And you can find through investigation that there is someone who doesn't find that person irritating, or some being. It might be the dog, or the wife, or the child. But not everybody finds the person that's irritating to you irritating, which is a clue that the irritation is on your part. And again, this could be, as we were talking about before, karma growing. That this person did some small thing that now drives you nuts, right? So this whole idea of the irritation comes from you and it's getting worse because of the way you continue to react or interact with this person. So the best thing to do is to try to change that interaction. And instead of maybe making a remark or walking away, try to do something nice for the person. And try to see that person from a different perspective, as Craig said before. And then, according to Geshe Michael, in 1 year, that irritating person will be gone. That's what he promised in this teaching. And I don't know if you've tried this, sincerely tried it, but I find it's happening in even less than a year. That sometimes the irritating person becomes a really nice friend. And that irritation flies on the rocket ship. That's another thing that Geshe Michael likes to talk about. I love that image. That who we are, our trajectory is such that we can awaken to our true nature. We're on that path because of all that we have. We are already amazing beings with all the resources we need to figure this out, to get there. And these things, irritating people, other things that come our way that bum us out, they're just flies on a rocket ship. That means they're not going to be there very long, right?
No.
And have absolutely no effect on the trajectory. You think of plywood?
Well,
A tile wood.
irritating people are precious jewels, so to speak.
No.
They help us learn,
Mhm.
so they will help our trajectory.
Possibly. They help us learn that we're in control of the irritation, right? We're in control of the rocket ship. It's
Mhm.
not them, it's us. That's one way to think of it. Or one of the lessons to take from it. So, the cause, they say, so the cause is that what? Why are you having an irritating person in your life? Why are you forced to see somebody as irritating?
Because you were probably that person at one point in your life.
Mm-hmm. That's what they say. That you were irritating to somebody else, so of course, what goes around comes around, you're going to get an irritating person in your present. So the most important thing is not to be irritating back. Otherwise, you just keep recreating the cycle. And it's going to get bigger and worse if you keep recreating the cycle. Yeah. So try to maybe see, if you can't bring yourself to do something nice to them as you face them, maybe do something, sneaky, like leave them a candy on their desk or something like that, where you're intentional about trying to change the karma instead of trying to tell them what a jerk they are or, tell them how annoying they are to you. So everything is dependently originating, they say, at this highest level of the schools of thinking on how things exist, dependent on causes and conditions that are coming from your mind because of past experiences. It's interesting, one of the definitions of karma is the impulse to act, they say. And, it just makes me think of our culture. We always feel like we're not being worthy unless we're doing something, accomplishing something, right? And that's one of our problems. How are we ever going to have that moment of repose where we're not thinking if we're constantly doing something? Mm-hmm. So it's just another way to think about karma, or whatever it is, those 8 worldly thoughts or something. We want people to think well of us, we want renown, we want to be happy, constantly causing us to do something to try to make it happen. And maybe if we just relaxed and appreciated everything we have, we would be closer to our goal than if we try to go out and make things happen. Just a thought.
What was it Gene said? For human beings, not human doings.
Who said that?
Gene. Philosopher.
Oh, yeah. The man of few but poignant words.
Very poignant.
Mm-hmm. So homework 3, on page 96 in the reading, the 2 truths. This is really, really interesting. It takes a while to really appreciate this, I think. What are the 2 truths? The 2 truths are that things in our world exist in 2 different ways. We say they exist deceptively or relatively. This is how they appear to our senses. Like they're out there and we're smelling them, tasting them, seeing them, touching them. Rather than thinking these are projections coming from our mind. And we think that these things that are out there that we have somewhat created through our labeling have an identity separate from our labeling, that they really exist the way in which we're seeing them. That's why it's called deceptive reality, because they exist in a way different than how we're used to seeing them. So that's one way that they exist. That's how we interact with them in the apparent world. But the ultimate truth is that these are objects that arise in our mind, forced on us by our past experience, according to this Buddhist philosophy. And as our good friend Elizabeth McClendon likes to say, PFPK, projections forced on us by our karma. Because she gets tired of saying, projections forced on us by our karma. Why is this happening? Projections forced on us by our karma. So she just says PFPK. And I would like to, we'll go over just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to read an explanation of this to you from one of the Buddhist teachers that I really, really liked, Gaelic Rinpoche. It's called Good Life and Good Death. Normally people think there has to be one truth only, but the Buddha's experience, which he shared with us, we all have two truths, and our life is totally based on them, the absolute truth and the relative truth. The absolute truth is not measurable. The relative truth is what allows us to measure, make judgments, take positions, take sides, your side, my side. All are possible because of the relative truth. The point of reference of relative truth is the truth that society accepts. It is the way we function every day. The point of view of absolute truth is that nothing exists the way it seems to. Absolute truth holds the mystery of life. You need both to function in this world. For those who understand absolute truth, perception changes tremendously. Everything they see, the walls, the windows, people, the road, is no longer strong, solid, intact. What they see has a sort of softening. Even a window is made of all kinds of particles. The particles are joined together, and if there's the slightest damage to one of the particles, the whole things fall apart. Those who understand interdependence begin to perceive all animate and inanimate objects like that, as particles coming together. Perfecting the understanding will lead one beyond the laws of physics, so the ultimate truth. Whether we recognize it or not, our life is based on both relative and absolute truth. Wisdom is understanding that. The path to freedom is wisdom and compassion. Freedom is a result, the perfection of body and mind. There is an abstract way of understanding, and there is the understanding that comes with experience. Both are necessary. The quality of understanding improves all the time. Learn a little bit, then think, then meditate. Acknowledge whatever conclusions you may have come to. Through that, you can heal yourself. Once you're able to remove the mind's obstacles, then your pure nature can definitely shine. When it does, you not only help yourself, you begin to help others. Then you are no longer in a sorry state. You are really getting to a wonderful state. And I believe that is how you can begin to have a beautifully functioning life. Gaelic Rinpoche, who crossed from Tibet with Ken Rinpoche, good friends. And when Lama Marut asked who he should take as a teacher, he was told either Geshe Michael or Gaelic Rinpoche. So, for me, he's a very, very important teacher. I've read a number of his pieces, and I find them perfectly understandable and meaningful. So, it's a great book. It talks about death too, obviously, life and death. So it's a really good book to take up and read at this time in our lives. I hope maybe that was helpful with this idea of two truths. Sure was a hard thing for me to grasp. Probably still is. I think I get it, but do I live it? Not so much all the time. Working on it. Okay, number 5. How does the self exist? The self or me does exist. This is really important to get. So we have two ways of being: relative or deceptive and ultimate. There is someone who is listening or teaching right now. But that self is the creation of my mind, a collection of past experiences. There is no self or me that is fixed or exists from its own side. That self exists dependent on projections forced on me by my karma, the FPK. 2 minutes. Last questions. I know they save the hard ones for the end. But maybe we can take these up next week. Or, I'm happy to stay around if there are questions. 6. How can the idea of karma coexist with this idea of emptiness? Or do they contradict each other? One of the phrases that's used a lot is this idea of there are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. If there wasn't this blank slate, this emptiness, then how could things change? How could there be this cause and effect ability of karma? Things couldn't change, so you wouldn't have the effects. No matter what you did, that certain things would be permanent. There would be no way out. So it's important to have both, the emptiness and the cause and effect, to make all this work, to empower you to change, as Craig put it, how you perceive your world, so that you can turn it from a world that needs fixing and has a lot of suffering into something that is an opportunity for you to teach and help and grow into your true nature. Therefore, karma and emptiness are completely intertwined, and anyone who understands emptiness understands the need to be absolutely moral in their everyday life. That's from the Answer King. Questions? Things to think about. 5 o'clock.
Sure.
2 classes. Thank you very, very much for doing it with me, for helping me learn these things better, to create some good karma for my future, and hopefully for all of you too. So if you don't mind, I'm going to again close with a prayer. So similar to what we've done in the past with the Buddhist prayers, I'll do the offering prayer again that I started with, and then a dedication. We offer the work we do here today to those from the past and those in the present who guide us toward an understanding of how this world really works and of our true potential. By this deed, may every living being experience a pure world. May our work here today empower us to be of help to others with our body, speech, and mind, remembering always the interdependent connections between us. Sarva Mangalam. May all beings be happy, especially all of you beings. Hope to see you next week. Please bring questions that we can discuss. If you have them, remember when you question, you help all of us. Great, thank you for